Let's talk Tyree Wilson. I got to be honest with you, Greg. Until this year, I didn't really know that much about him. And now every mock draft you look at, the edge rusher from Texas Tech is ranked in the top 10. What do you see from him?
Yeah, and he just looks the part, Ross. I mean, he's 6'5.5". He's 271. His arm length and his wingspan is ridiculous. His arm length is 35 and 5/8. His wingspan is like Giannis in the NBA. So, I mean, this guy really looks the part. So he has imposing size. He has imposing length. He's athletic. I think that while his game right now is probably built a little more on strength and power and relentlessness, there are more than enough flashes of bend and flexibility to lead you to believe that he can become a more complete edge player. So many of these guys in college, particularly with teams playing a lot of three-man fronts in college football, end up playing inside offensive tackles. That's not going to happen with these guys in the NFL. These guys are going to be edge players. So we're talking about a guy, as I said, when you talk about the measurables, he has similar measurables to Trayvon Walker, similar measurables to, let's say, a Jason Pierre-Paul, a Carlos Dunlap, who's been in the league for a long time. He looks like those guys. Those are pretty impressive physical specimens. So he's a high-level traits prospect. I think one thing that is a concern, and I don't know how this is seen by coaches, he was late off the ball a lot. And I think that, in the NFL, you played offensive line. If guys are a little late off the ball, boy, does that give you an advantage, does it not?
They have no shot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the D lineman, if you're late off the ball, how many times you see a guy get a sack or a pressure that's late off the ball? I mean, almost never.
Again, like I said, I'm not a coach, so I don't want to sit here and say, oh, they'll fix that with no problem. But my guess is it is fixable, but it's going to have to be fixed.
When the grades came out and Michael Mayer, for some people, was the third or fourth tight end, there's some mock drafts where he doesn't go in the first round. Notre Dame's on TV all the time, Greg. And I felt like he was like their best player the last couple years. I mean, you watch a Notre Dame game, and that's who they got the ball to. That was their guy 2 years in a row. Is it just the bad 40 time, or he wouldn't threaten down the seam? What do you see from Michael Mayer, Greg?
He's a fascinating guy. You got to watch a lot of Michael Mayer because he's not an explosive athlete, Ross. So in other words, you don't pop the tape on and see a couple of plays and go, wow. There are some times when he releases off the line of scrimmage where he almost looks a little sluggish. He's just not a naturally explosive player. So you have to watch him. And the more and more you watch him, the more you realize he's just a really good player, but he doesn't have natural athleticism and explosiveness. But so you wouldn't describe him like we just talked about Kincaid. You wouldn't describe him as smooth and fluid, but he has a really refined sense and feel to how to run routes. He's got subtle, nuanced head feints and short area foot quickness. He's got more than functional play speed, even though he's not fast. And he is absolutely dominant at the catch point. I mean, he's got a big frame. He's got strong, soft hands. He's got body control. He catches through contact. I mean, there are few better guys locating the ball on inaccurate throws and moment of truth, those kinds of throws than he is. I mean, who he kind of reminded me of when he came out of college, and this guy obviously became a great player, but he was a third-round pick when he came out of college. He reminded me of Jason Witten, because Jason Witten, you wouldn't say Jason Witten was an explosive vertical athlete, but obviously Jason Witten was a great player.
Witten always got open. He understood defenses so well,
and
so
I think Michael
smart,
Mayer's going to be like that.
And he used his body so well to get open.
Yeah, Mayer will be like that. And he's going to be a good pro.
So Josh McDaniels comes in, and Josh is not going to be shy about this is what I want, this is what I don't want, and if you're what I don't want, get out of here. Darren Waller kind of got in his doghouse for whatever reason. They trade him to the Giants, and they get Meyer, who's I think people don't think of him as an explosive play tight end, but he led all tight ends in this class with 8 receptions on passes of 20 or more air yards. So he can do that. But what Dave Ziegler said about him, the GM, was it's the overall skill set. It's getting open in short spaces. It's, winning on 3rd and 6. And I went back and watched all his touchdowns. And that's where Mayer, I think, can be really effective in what Josh wants to do. It seems to me, and you might disagree, he almost wants the guy who can win at all 3 levels of the field, as opposed to like Waller, who can just take off and scald a safety, 30 yards up the seam.
Yeah, Meyer was a fascinating watch for me because you have to watch a lot of him because he's not a natural athletically explosive guy.
He kind of rumbles. He is not athletically impressive on tape.
No, I would agree with that. And that's why you've got to keep watching him, which, you and I do. And you probably wouldn't describe him as smooth and fluid, but he certainly has a refined sense and feel for how to use his vertical stem. Plus, he's kind of subtle and nuanced with his head feints, and he does have kind of deceptive short area quickness and that functional play speed. Like, he's not going to really run by you, but he is a 3-level guy, even though he's not necessarily just going to line up and stretch the seam. He's just not that guy, and he's dominant at the catch point. I think that's what's really important. He is dominant.
That showed up. That was like his primary attribute to me. He'll just body you. Let's get to your next guy, and this is the Alabama Byron Young, not the Tennessee Byron Young.
Yeah.
Who went to the Raiders, who did some interesting their guy nested Jade Silvera from Arizona State. I think they got in the 7th round. I like him too. But talk to me about Byron Young and what he does for a Raiders defense that needs kind of help all over the place.
Yeah, I really liked Byron Young from Alabama. I thought that he was scheme versatile, position versatile. He played inside at Alabama. There were times he lined up as a wide 9 and rushed the quarterback. Yeah. He's got, as I said, positional versatility, which is a trait, obviously.
Yeah, he was all over the place.
Yeah, I think he showed off the ball quickness to play in a 1-gap system if you wanted him to. I thought he had point of attack strength to be a force as a 2-gap player if you chose to do that. And, teams now are not one or the other 100%, as you know. I thought he had pretty refined hand usage for a college player, particularly when he was rushing the quarterback, but it did show up as a run defender as well. He has really long arms, and I thought he understood how to use them. He had a great arm extension to control and displace offensive linemen. I think he's just scratching the surface because, Alabama, because they've got, every guy in their defense is a 5-star. So It's not like Young played 55, 60 snaps a game. So I think he's just scratching the surface of what he can be.
I think the 1-gap, 2-gap versatility shows up on tape in that he's just as effective right over the blocker as he is to either side.
I agree.
Like he can be a 4 or 4-eye pretty equivalently as far as what he can do, which is
and there's so much, there's so much 5 down lineman fronts now that and those fronts sort of mix and match 1-gap and 2-gap. So I think he fits really well in those schemes.
And I think Patrick Graham, their defensive coordinator, would like to be more versatile, would like to be more sort of schematically diverse. He maybe just didn't have the players to do it. That was my experience watching his defenses with the Giants. Guys like this, you bring them in, and certainly, Tyree Wilson, and maybe he can start to put those things together.
Absolutely.